Applying Jesus. We are here in season 2, and this is episode 2. And y'all, season 2 is intentionally different than season 1. In this season, we are talking with folks hard at work reimagining what it means to respond and reform the issues within our society. These conversations are going to help us in the church reimagine what it means to be part of the solution, the kingdom come. These conversations are going to be challenging, but I need them and you need them in order to learn how to join up with what's happening now, as well as expand the possibility of abundant life for all. That's what the life of Jesus shows us how to do, and what he keeps calling us to do to be the part of the good work that he started. This is what is going to have to happen to impact our culture, and I'm so convinced that this is what has to happen in order to involve the next generations in our faith. So today, we're talking with a friend of a friend, Michael Gienger.
We can just be friends, Amy. That's fine, So, yeah.
Right.
But, yeah, absolutely.
Well, truly, that's how we got it. It's like 1 degree of separation.
That's right. It's amazing.
Yeah. And he is the Reverend Pastor Michael Gienger. He serves as co-pastor of Central United Methodist Church in Galveston, Texas, which is a hybrid church plant and revitalization. He is an elder in the United Methodist Church. It is. Having earned an undergrad degree in religion from Baylor and a Master of Divinity from Perkins School of Theology at SMU. He's got a vision of building a community at Galveston Central Church where all are welcome regardless of socioeconomic status. He says, "My dream for Central is that you walk in there and you can't tell the difference of who is being served and who is serving." Michael, welcome to Applying Jesus.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks.
What an honor to be here.
Yeah. And I'm well aware that what we have to talk about, it's like a seed. We are doing the good work of planting something that seems fairly innocuous. And then my hope and my prayer is that it's going to grow up like a weed.
Yeah.
And then like a bush. And then like a big tree. Use biblical imagery, the oak of righteousness.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, for the people of God to really become a part of what God is doing in this time. So because your path here, as we were talking about just a little bit ago, your path here is winding, as well as so is the church that you
Very much
pastor.
So. Winding is the kindest way to put that. Yeah.
So can you tell us the short version of whether you want to tell your story or you want to tell the church's story? I'll leave that up to you. But, how did you come to this place you are now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, my journey and Central's journey are both kind of winding. So I'm originally from Connecticut, of all places.
Okay.
So, and then lived in Lake Charles, the thriving metropolis of Lake Charles, Louisiana for a while. And then ended up in South Houston, Clear Lake area, grew up in that area. And grew up in the church, grew up going to Clear Lake United Methodist Church, ended up in Waco, like you said, and I went to go study religion there, and it was a beautiful time. The Baylor religion department was really formative for me, but it was really time spent out of the Baylor bubble that was really transformative. Yeah. Baylor, or Waco at the time, was the 5th poorest city in the state of Texas. Wow. Chip and Joanna have changed that a little bit. But yeah, so getting exposed to poverty in Waco, interning and working at Church Under the Bridge, really transformative time. My first kind of interaction with those experiencing homelessness. Yeah. And so fast forward, seminary, moved back home. Got appointed to this little church in Galveston called Central. Central's been around since 1885, so it's a really old church. Yeah. Grew, became this kind of thriving, very white, very middle-class place. It was kind of the who's who of everybody who's somebody in Galveston. There's great old photos of people in fancy suits and ladies with big hats. Yeah. And grew to a membership of close to 1,000 in the 1940s and 50s. Wow. And then things began to shift like they did. The congregation was aging quite a bit. Some of those members, like from 1885, I think were still there when I got there. So lots of blue hairs. But like hurricanes happened and this aging population and massive decline. Neighborhoods started changing. And so when I got there, there were 4 people left in this church that had a membership of 1,000. 4.
I have more people in my house.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So yeah, when my wife, we weren't married at the time, but dating, about to get married, when we showed up, it was a 50% increase in attendance, which was great. So percentages were our friends early on, And I think they appointed me there because they thought you can't screw up 4 people too bad. And so anyway, we recognized that like what had been started there, Central was always kind of on the leading edge of community engagement. So like in the early or mid 1900s, they were really involved with training up women to go out into the workforce, which at the time was like a really big deal, right? Yeah. So learning all these skills. They had a computer training program for a while. They were instrumental in the yellow fever epidemic when that was a thing. So we were ready for COVID when that pandemic happened. Been there, done that.
Right.
And so that kind of spirit of like engaging with the community, doing innovative ministry had always been present. And so we kind of saw ourselves as grafting onto that and starting something new. So we actually shut the church down for about 6 months. This was from like July 2014 through February of 2015, and relaunched with kind of a vision towards who has church stopped working for. So you mentioned a focus on socioeconomic exclusion, but also like we're interested in theological diversity, we're interested in racial diversity, all of those kinds of things. Yeah. It's a fantastic place.
Right. So that's so interesting that they were, like, innovation was in the DNA of the church.
Yeah.
How did you find that out? Was there somebody from the 1850s or
1885
that stuck around and was able to tell you?
They did an incredible job of keeping up with records. Okay. So if you walk into our little library room, like I have the original membership book from 1885, which is, so like looking over the names of these saints, right, that were a part of starting this community. Yeah. There's all these records of things. They wrote at their 100-year anniversary a play that walks Central through like the ages. So it's incredible, and it's the cheesiest thing in the entire world.
Of course.
But it kind of documents their history in this very creative outlet. That's a play about who Central was, how they went through these different stages. And so gleaning these little bits of history and creative outpouring of just who they were and what they were doing was great.
That's
obviously
incredible.
That changed at some point because they died.
Right.
But yeah, it was a cool time. It's something neat to graft onto.
Wow. So it was kind of at that critical point where probably the conference was like, well, we'll just take these assets back or sell it or something like that.
And to their credit, the 4 folks that were there were incredibly gracious and recognized they loved this church, but it wasn't working anymore, you know? And so I think when faced with the decision of closing, and Galveston had already closed the United Methodist Church, so there's 4 on the island now, but there were 5 not that long ago.
Okay.
And so not wanting to close another one, these folks kind of blessed us and handed the keys and said, you know, give it a try. So just grateful for that kind of generosity.
Absolutely.
And being able to see a future that's bigger than the present.
Right. I think for so many churches, period, especially United Methodist churches, that there's a real hesitancy to see anything besides what we've always known and what we've always done.
That's exactly right. And the anxiety there is that a lot of these churches that you're mentioning are going to have a story similar to Central's, right? Yeah. With this kind of like slow decline that eventually you got 4 people left in your building looking at each other like, what are we doing? You know?
Yeah. I mean, we're experiencing that in the campus that we're moving to as well.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting journey for us to finally end up there.
Yeah, I bet so. Yeah. I bet so. We'll have to share notes as y'all get deeper into that. So
right. And I think this episode is going to be released well past when the lease is signed, so I can...
We'll be good to go. Yes. If not surprise, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Teaser.
Go back and edit that. Yeah, exactly. So what we're talking about in this season is challenging, but I want it to be hopeful to followers of Christ. I don't want the people who are listening to continue the patterns of the way we've always done it. In fact, in episode 1, Tracy J. and I had that conversation about, and she said that is the phrase she hates the most, is this is the way we've always done it. Because I do want people to have a vision. So something that's been striking me, and I've been receiving it from many authors and books and podcasts that I've been listening to. It's kind of like the big light bulb over my head right now. But I most recently heard it in the book by Father Gregory Boyle, The Whole Language.
Yeah.
I'm listening to that because he reads it. It's amazing.
He's so good.
Yes. And he says, and it's the same theme, but he says this verbatim. He says, there is an abundance of goodness and innocence. Focus on that. And that's what y'all have found at Central.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think, the church has really gotten this backwards. So we love to start with Genesis 3, right?
Yeah,
with the fall. Right. Everything's terrible. Everything's broken. Everybody's bad.
Yeah.
But that's not where the book starts.
Right.
It starts in Genesis 1 with over and over God saying, this is good.
Yeah.
This is good. Yeah. This is good. And so being made in the image of that God who declared all things good, that should be our starting point when we're interacting with people, when we're interacting with institutions, way of being, looking for goodness and beauty. And so Yeah, I think that's kind of the work that we're trying to do at Central is, especially with this particular group of people, in our case, those experiencing homelessness, that much of the world has said, no, this is bad. There's nothing good here. What good can come out of a place like Nazareth, right? Or in our case, the streets of Galveston. It's trying to reframe that and show people, no, just by being a human being, there's inherently within you sacred goodness and beauty and truth, and trying to pull that out of folks.
Yeah.
You know.
So you mentioned experiencing church with. Did you call it Church Without Walls?
Church Under the Bridge.
Under the Bridge, because we have the same. There's a church called Church Without Walls.
Yes.
Here in Houston.
Yeah, we didn't have walls either, so it's under a bridge.
But is it the same program that we have here in Houston as well, or just different
I think
cities,
it's different. I don't know if it's the same organization, but I think it's the same kind of model of essentially they would set up under I-35 every Sunday, and it was this beautiful mix of, again, people experiencing homelessness. So you'd have like a prostitute sitting next to a Baylor law professor on the same Sunday morning. It was this beautiful kind of kingdom experience, vision of what could be.
Right. So is that where you first encountered, maybe you didn't, maybe there's another experience where you got to this point of not Genesis 3, but Genesis 1? Where we start from good rather than from bad. Yeah,
I think so. I think when you start, Greg Boyle again, he says, right, we're not supposed to, it's not about having the right stance about a particular issue, but it's about standing with people at the margins. And so I think when you start to align yourself with people that have been historically demonized or marginalized or cast aside, and you're just overwhelmed with the generosity that exists in these spaces. I mean, I'm blown away by the stories that happen in these communities that are often overlooked. Sometimes accidentally, often intentionally. All of these beautiful things that are happening there that we don't see. And so, you know, from Church Under the Bridge and then also the work at Central, really trying to use my platform to highlight those stories, to remind people of the humanity that often gets dismissed. I think, again, those experiencing homeless are kind of the modern day equivalent of lepers and leprosy. We keep away, unclean, kind of a thing. And so trying to highlight these stories, and not to center myself or anything weird like that, but really just providing platforms for these voices that are already speaking. They don't need a voice. They don't need mine. They already have voices. And so trying to elevate those to a place of prominence.
But you have a front row seat to all of that.
Oh, it's the best job in the world.
And people invite you to podcasts, so you get to...
this is the best stuff. Yeah.
So you get to, you may not be their voice, but you get to give them a voice. And that's one of the reasons why I like Greg Boyle's book so much, because he talks about the homies that he works with. And so tell us about these improbable friendships that have come. That seems to be the trendy word to use.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
But just how that all came about. So this ancient church, ancient in our standards.
Oh yeah, by American. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Becomes this place where people can come and engage. I mean, that didn't just happen overnight.
No, and it actually wasn't the plan. So like I wanted to be this very kind of hip, cool, you know, young, lights and flashy, all that kind of stuff to try to attract folks. And that's not what Galveston is. It's kind of what we were doing in League City, but Galveston's a very different place. Galveston really is a microcosm of the entire world. You have incredible wealth, you have incredible institutions like UTMB and American National there, and also a poverty rate of close to 25%, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So just by kind of being where we're located, right in the center of the island, we started bumping elbows and shoulders with folks that didn't have anywhere to go, and they became friends. So we kind of trace it back to a picnic we had in 2018. There's a park called Kempner Park, which is beautiful. It's where a lot of Galveston's unsheltered folks hang out, and it's where when we do outdoor events, we go there. So we had a big barbecue. My folks are good, typical church people, and so they saw these homeless folks over in the corner, and they said, "Hey, do you want to come eat barbecue with us?" And they did, and it was great. And
I don't know. I have to stop you. I don't know that that's all church folks, but
maybe not. It's
in the DNA of Methodism. I definitely would say that the Wesleyan social outreach.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So they were great. They invited people over, and then maybe this is where the good church people thing came in. Is they said, "Hey, you should join us. Like on Sunday, you should come to church." You got to do the invitation, but you don't expect people to take you up on it. And would you believe these homeless people had the audacity to show up and take the invitation seriously?
Wow.
And so just that kind of encounter with people that became friends, improbable friends, you start to hear about needs, you start to hear about desires and hopes and dreams and struggles. And so we worked hard to kind of foster those relationships and to create a space of mutuality. So again, just people showing up on Sundays. Central's always done food on Sunday mornings. We have little muffins and coffee and things. Well, that started going a lot quicker because we learned that there's no place to eat on Sundays. Every other day of the week, there's Salvation Army, there's Our Daily Bread, but there's nothing on Sundays. And so my community, to give them credit, didn't get frustrated, but instead said, how do we make this a more robust meal? And so out of that came this thing we call Piecemeal, which is a chance to eat together, to share stories together across sort of demographic divides. Yeah. And so, it became this wonderful space to learn about each other, to stand with each other, and create a spirit of mutuality. So what's different, I think, about Central than a lot of social service places is everything we do has an element of mutuality and togetherness, reciprocity with it. So like you mentioned, my dream is that when you walk in, you can't tell who's who. So if you were to come in on a Tuesday, Thursday, which is when we provide most of our social services, you might walk into the kitchen, and I hope you can't tell who's experiencing homelessness and who's not. Everybody's working together, preparing the meal for the day. Right. Or we've got a bicycle repair shop on campus. Yeah. And so you can't tell who's from the streets and who's a middle-class person, and they're all working together and trying to bring this kingdom to earth, to Galveston.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess what I'm interested in learning is, was there ever for you like an aha moment? Or we're not of the same generation. I'll just go ahead and say that. I'm
much
a bit
older. So,
yeah, right. So, for me, I think it was growing up white, growing up privileged, growing up how I grew up in the middle of Houston. My eyes were open in high school, but it took me a long time to get, 25-ish years to just get to this place of really open vision of what God's world is supposed to look like. And so was it more of that for you, but obviously on a shorter time frame, or were there these big firework moments where you said, well, this has to change? How did it go for you?
Yeah, I think of both and kind of like moments, and then also this kind of slow process. So in high school, I'd see folks that were standing on the street corners with signs, and I'm just a curious person, so I wanted to know more about what that was about. And then through college, like being able to develop language and structures and frameworks to understand, not everyone had the same upbringing that I did. And as you're hearing stories of people and realizing like our lives are very parallel, except being born into privilege, I had all of these like social safety nets. Yeah. So like there's a couple folks in our congregation, you can track our lives, like they go exactly the same. Right. And when I made these decisions, I had parents, I had friends, I had mentors and coaches that came and sort of caught me.
Dealing with trauma or abuse.
Exactly
or
right.
Like that. Yeah.
Or I had a savings account. Or I had, again, like could call dad or mom knew this influential person in the community that could get me out of this kind of thing. And other folks don't have that same experience. So kind of that big shift, for me, it was in seminary to realize like there's no such thing as normal, right? So the way that I'm seeing the world is only the way that I'm seeing the world and my experiences and my kind of social construction of thing. Not universalizing that to everybody, because I think when we do that, that's when we create anger, or we'll use, talk about entitlement or these kind of things, because we assume everyone has the same experience that we do. Right. That's not the case. Right. So that's shifting. I like to be a collector of stories, so learning from people that way, and just trying to cultivate a spirit of curiosity. I think that was where some of that learning happened for me. And then in seminary also, like, I was really moved by liberation theology. This last Sunday, I just preached on Exodus 3 and talking about the God who hears the cry of injustice, right? Yeah. And so we've got personal sin, but also the systemic sin that at least the God of Scripture seems very interested in. Right. I think you could argue that's the theme. Yeah. I haven't counted, but there's 2,103 verses in the Scriptures about
give or take
the poor and the oppressed and crying out and God hearing the cry. Right. And so for me, like as a eager seminary student, like I want to be where God is. And if this is a God who's hanging out on the margins and with the oppressed, if I want to learn more about God, certainly book knowledge in seminary is important. But it seemed like my time on the streets was much more important. And I think I encountered the divine more frequently hanging out with those in poverty, creating a sense of solidarity, these improbable friendships.
Right. So and you hear about that, when people go on mission trips and, they go to save people.
Yeah.
And then you come back and it's like, oh no, I'm the one with the problems. So where did we take such a left or a right turn where that's not what the American church really is about? The American church is about individualism.
That's right.
It's about personal sin.
That's right.
I mean, it's been what? I mean, I remember Bonhoeffer wrote about this too. So it's been a long time coming, but so how we know, I think, well, maybe we don't know how we got there, and maybe we need an episode on church history. I don't know.
Sure.
But I'm so intrigued by, once you know where things are and how we got here, we don't want to keep repeating the same mistakes. That's insanity.
Yeah.
Or repeating the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And so where we are with the craziness in the world and the division in the world, which has been there for a long, long time. Right. It's just now in everyone's face. How Michael, please tell me how we save the world.
Yeah. I have no idea. But I think it starts with these little movements, right? And I think, one of the principles that Adrienne Marie Brown, who wrote Emergent Strategy, who does this beautiful work of thinking about social activism and advocacy and how that aligns with like nature, right? So she has this whole thing on fractals, which has been so powerful for me. So like I don't know how to save the world,
right?
But I can try to make my church, my little community that I have some influence over, and try to make that a space that reflects like equity and goodness and beauty and truth, and is a little microcosm, and then maybe that can like expand to my neighborhood, and then maybe my city, and then who knows what happens that way. But I think focusing on those places, and I think to your point earlier about church history, the last like 100 or 200 years, there's a great book called The Great Giveaway that is essentially arguing that the church has given away some of its most important, influential roles, tasks, duties in the world. Yeah. And so the rise of the nonprofit sector, which I think originally was a lot of the work of the church, that we said, we don't actually care about human bodies. Right. We just care about this like floaty, cloudy, like your soul, whatever that even means.
Right.
And so one of our values at Central is care for the whole person, and so we think like your spiritual life is your actual life.
Right.
And so reclaiming that, instead of this kind of Gnostic heresy that says like, we're just going to talk about sin, it's all going to be personal and hyper individual.
And someday it'll all be fine.
That's right. In the sweet by and by. So sweet child, we don't have to worry about your oppression right now because God's going to take care of it. And I just started to say, I'm not going to cuss on your podcast, but like it makes me want to say bad words, Amy, So I just think we have to care about real people. Matt Russell, who's here, says people won't care if you can save their souls if you can't save their butts in the meantime, you know? And so the church needs to get back into some butt-saving kinds of things, with a model, though, that isn't like me having the answers, giving them to you, but us working together and building up communal resiliency, depending on each other, learning from one another. Sort of what we see in the book of Acts in the early church.
Yeah, and thank you. I don't know if you read my notes.
Hashtag segue.
Yes, that was so brilliantly done. Because so many preachers, so many churches talk about we've got to get back to the Acts model for the church. And I don't think that means what they think it means.
It does not.
To quote The Princess Bride.
Yes.
So is that even a realistic model?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's beautiful things to pull from it and themes there. So like the idea of sharing things together, like it's wonderful. We should be able to share our stuff together. We should take care of the least of us. There should be like God's word presence whenever we gather. But I think it's foolish to think that like we haven't learned anything over the last 2,000 years. It's a very kind of like, I just think it, as we're evolving, as we're learning more about God, that's 2,000 years of interaction with the divine, where the church is kind of learning who it is, what it's supposed to be doing in the world. So to dismiss that for a model that's sort of in this like bubble, I think is just silly. These folks were responding to their culture. It's highly contextual what's happening there. And I think it would be foolish not to do the same thing. In the same way that like what happens in the Heights is going to look different than what happens in Galveston. It's the same thing for the first century church. So we can always pull these larger themes of justice, of care for the least of these, spending time together. But I think trying to do a one-to-one thing, I think, is missing the point a little bit. Well,
and I keep going back to as well, and I'm fascinated with Hebrew in the Old Testament and Judaism, and how that translates, and how we also lost that. As Christians who weren't Christians, we were just like a sect of Judaism for a long time.
God's not a Christian. Like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what.
Right. Yeah, he's also not white or blue eyes.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
goodness.
Yeah, I know.
All kind of spoilers on this podcast.
Right. Yeah. I always joke about this. I was a youth at First United Methodist downtown.
Okay.
And so when we would have lock-ins, which we could never do, and today that's a good example. We would never do a lock-in anymore. Never. If you don't know what a lock-in is, just please Google it and you'll be shocked.
Yeah, see hell, I think, in the
dictionary. Like I don't know that I would ever let my children do a lock-in. I don't know. Like, golly, what we did. But there was this, this is a tangent, but it's about white Jesus. There's this painting, and it's the white Jesus with the hair combed back, the blue eyes.
Swedish Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, right. And he's kind of looking off to the side, and we swear, like the people I keep in touch with that we were in youth group, we swear his eyes followed you.
I believe
Freaked me
Just
out.
waiting for you to sin, right, Amy? Yeah, got my eye on you. So.
Right, and we were at a youth lock-in, so what do you think we were doing?
Yeah, exactly
Besides
right.
running around the church in the middle of the night.
Exactly right. Jesus is watching you, Amy. So. But we have kind of, like, I think that's important. We've made Jesus to be sort of like a Santa Claus-y kind of figure of making a list and checking it twice, and instead of this truth and beauty and goodness that you're talking about, I wanted to pull that out and
sinners
help people flourish.
In the hands of an angry God. I'm like, man.
No, we missed it.
We did. And
I do think God gets angry at things like injustice.
Absolutely.
And I think God gets angry at manipulation and exploitation and all of that. But, right, it's an anger that's to move us to, do better. To live better, and not squishing people, but helping people live in their full humanity. Yeah, my favorite prophet for that is Amos. Oh. He goes so hard on it, Amos 5. And, we don't really preach much of that in our churches. Well, you look what happens. I mean, we just celebrated Martin Luther King Day. Yeah, right. Use those words. This is what happens, right? Yeah. So I asked this of my guests in episode 1, and it may just be a consistent question. So there's this awakening. There's these mushrooming of movements, and activists who have been in this work for a long time now have a much larger platform. We're only at the beginning of that. And so where do we go? Now, since you won't save the world, I would like you to predict the future. Good. We're in a roll today. Right. So what does it look like next? And I always have in the back of my mind, because I guess technically 3 generations in my house. My husband and I are Gen X. And then my older 2 daughters are Gen Z, and then my youngest is Gen Alpha. And so something that's haunted me, a friend of mine said in the course of a conversation, she was like, we're only 1 generation away from our faith disappearing. I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't done enough Bible study. I haven't done it. No. How do we make not just things appealing, but there has to be some kind of invitation. They have to want to. Sure. They're just not, my kids and I have this conversation all the time. They don't want to just go to church because it's a performative thing that their mom makes them do. So, how do we take any kind of momentum that we have, and do we just do that at an individual level, or can we participate with movements? Again, I think it's both and, but how is this ever going to be appealing to a generation like Gen Z that has the world at their fingertips and they learn everything from TikTok? Yeah. And so I think there's a couple things in there. One, I think it's asking those questions about why has it become less appealing, right? And so again, I preached on Sunday about this God who hears the cry, right? But I grew up in churches that there was no cry present, right? Which then asks the question, like, is God present in that space too? And so I find that I'm a millennial, so kind of in between where you guys are, is my peers that aren't engaged in any kind of like ecclesial life are still very involved in social movements, social justice sort of work. And their frustration with the church is some of the institutional baggage that comes with that, or their lack of engagement with some of these meaningful things. And so the question becomes, like, is this even relevant anymore? You're reading from texts that are thousands of years old that we know address all of these kinds of issues and give us beautiful insight into what it means to be human and to flourish and to find meaning. But most of our churches aren't doing things like that. Right. And so I think paralleling with some of these social groups, social causes, where they can see the church being sort of the leader in the community instead of often the conservative force that's kind of pulling back from the change that needs to happen. I think that's a really easy way for us to engage. So we've got folks at Central. Our local coffee shop just wrote us a check for $2,000 to go to Central stuff. The owner wants nothing to do with religion. The coffee shop is not a religious space, but they've said what you're doing with the poor in the community, like we're interested in partnering in all things good that way. And so finding those broader entry points for people, whether that's through social engagement or whatnot.
Right.
And then I think like you joke about your daughter's on TikTok, but like why isn't the church on TikTok? Right. You know? And maybe it is in some places. Right. I don't have a TikTok. I need to get one. I don't understand it, but but I can learn, right? Yeah. And so finding...
Well, they don't want to see us on TikTok.
Yes,
Let me be clear.
That's fair.
They don't want to see me. They don't want to see you. They want to see their peers.
Yeah, but what a beautiful tool to leverage.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think it shows that if we're made in the image of this God who fundamentally is relationship, right? Trinity, community that's there. If we're made in that image, like there's a part of us that's hardwired for community. And I think your daughter's like incessant scrolling on TikTok is this expression of this longing for community that we have. So the expressions of that are going to look radically different going forward.
Yeah.
Controversial. I'm not sure Sunday morning is all that important. And I think in the future, I think it's going to become less and less important. And the stuff that happens midweek, the sort of lived praxis of church rather than, so orthopraxy over orthodoxy, I think is going to take increasing relevance. Churches that look more like the old school, like mission kind of thing are going to become more important.
Yeah. And you see things like the 24/7 prayer movement that Pete Greig started in England that just, blew up because that's not a Sunday morning thing. That people can walk into a prayer room at any time and experience the presence of God. And that's what's transformative.
Absolutely.
And I think at least that's what I hope. That's my prayer for my children, that's what they recognize they hunger for.
Yeah.
And spirituality is exploding as well. So whether or not you call that Christian or you call that, I mean, my middle daughter and I have had conversations about, she's done research on the Wiccan religion.
Sure.
And, I just think about some of my very conservative evangelical friends who would just freak out.
Yes.
And I'm like, they want to talk. They want to explore.
That's it. And the worst thing I think we could do is shut down those conversations.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you want to breed a spirit of curiosity.
Right.
And I think as Christians, right, if we do believe that God is in control of everything, we've got the ability to claim truth wherever we find it. And so any kind of good thing that's good, beautiful, true, we get to say, thumbs up, we approve of that kind of thing.
Right. Well, but I think that's scary for people because it's a lot easier to live in a box.
Yes. And we love our boxes. We love our compartments. We love clean lines.
Right.
I don't think that's what Jesus was very interested in. I mean, he's flipping over tables.
Yeah.
And
in the temple. In the church house.
Yes. And so, how have we moved to a space where like preserving the carpet and not getting coffee stains on it is more important, where Jesus is flipping over temples and tables.
I did take issue when my daughter told me that her Young Life group spilled green paint all over the church walls. I was like, oh God.
It's funny. You got to come to our building sometime. Our building's falling apart around us, right? And so, I think some of that rethinking of even what is space used for and what does it look like? Yeah. Because I think what I hear in your daughter's story is this search for meaning, right? The search for how do I relate to other people? How do I relate to something that's transcendent beyond myself?
Right.
How do I understand myself in that? And fostering those conversations. And for me, at least, like a Christian worldview has answered a lot of those questions.
Right.
For others, I think it looks different, and we can travel alongside and journey with.
And there's so much untapped wisdom in our tradition as well.
That's right.
I mean, we have like the old is new again. And so what is appealing to somebody in their 20s also is not going to be appealing in your 30s.
That's exactly right. Thank God for some of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean? And so I think there tends to be in the course of pastoring and serving people, it's as they go along this journey, at once their faith becomes more expansive, but they also long for the tangible things of ritual and liturgy. And so finding that, the youth might not be that interested in liturgy, but finding the beauty in that and continuing to offer it. I think you hit on something when you said we have to make the invitation.
That's exactly right. And I think to your point, like we need tangible things too.
Yeah.
Like so much of, that's a reason why I love being a part of a sacramental church, right? That has things like baptism and communion. Yeah. Like, yes, I can philosophize and pontificate about like grace and like God meeting us in these places.
Right.
But I need that dang bread and juice every single week. Because for me, it's something I can put my hands on, I can touch, I can understand. And I think that's where rituals are so important.
Yeah.
And so again, the inevitable swift shift between sort of mainline and evangelical, this pendulum swing that happens, we need ritual and liturgy and ways for us to sort of concretize our faith.
Yeah. And I think the younger generations want accountability as well.
Sure.
For all the bad things.
Institutional accountability.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to. Whenever George Floyd happened, Central put out a statement, and in that it was a tracing of history. Our cornerstone on the end of the church has its Central United, because this is pre-UMC, Central Methodist Episcopal Church South is what it says on there.
Church. Wow.
Not AME, but was part of the
that's
split.
African. Yeah.
So we were the church that said, whenever the opportunity for black bishops or black pastors we said, no, thank you.
Wow.
So it was way before I was there. Yeah. Obviously, this is, 19th or I guess mid 20th century. But it's still a reckoning we have to have as part of our history and part of who Central is. And so I think that kind of accountability and then a tangible working towards a better future. I think those things are really important.
Yeah. I did something because I just wanted to know. I always had in the back of my mind ever since what year was it? I have to calculate based on when my children were born. So 2006, I think it was like 2007, we had a family reunion, and my family's from Tennessee and Atlanta and Georgia. Well, Atlanta. They're from Atlanta. They're not from Georgia. And we even near St. Simons, Georgia, the St. Simons Island, there's actually a historical plot where on my dad's side of the family that they were participants and activists in the Revolutionary War. And so there's like a historical marker on this homestead. And I remember thinking, oh man, and I've thought this for a long time. I was like, I wonder if we own slaves. And my mom has always said, well, my family was too poor. And I'm like, well, that's not necessarily a precursor. But my mom, I think her family got here later. My dad's family was here for a long time. And so I just always wondered. And my aunt, my dad's sister has always been very active. And she was a lawyer for a long time. She actually went back to school and got her law degree to practice for people who couldn't afford lawyers. And anyway, long story short, I did a 15-second Google search and came up with tax records where this family that is celebrated in Georgia has this historical homestead, sold 15 persons to pay for their taxes one year. And I was like, literally, it took me no time to find this out. And so I had always suspected. And so I was like, well, crap.
Yeah.
I won't cuss on my own podcast. Yeah. Well, crap. Okay, there's the proof.
Right.
Because I need to know these things, and my children are asking these questions. Yeah. And so I called my aunt, and she was like, yeah, remember that family reunion in 2007 where we were all sitting around, and I wasn't because I was chasing a toddler. She said, I asked your dad if he thought we had slave owners in our family, and he said, oh yeah, most definitely. I'm like, but that was something that never got communicated to me. There was this huge truncation of information in family history that happened between my parents' generation and we just don't talk about those things.
Right.
And so that's not I don't think that hiding that stuff or not talking about it or even just being ignorant of it is going to do the future generations any good.
And especially like switching like your personal family and the courage that took to kind of go through some of those records and then thinking about that for the institutional church, right?
Yeah.
And then what are the ways that that's still being played out?
Yeah.
And often like more insidious and more hard to find ways. I mean, yes, we could do a whole deep dive on the UMC and I'm sure you'll do that in other episodes.
Maybe,
kind of
I don't know. In our church, most people don't even know that we're Methodist because it seems more denominational. But but still that plays out in most other traditional denominations too, whether it's the Episcopals or Presbyterians or even non-denominational. They have their own issues.
Absolutely,
they have their own issues.
Often more.
They might be slightly more modern, but
yeah, in some ways, yeah, absolutely.
So it's these things that rattle around, and for me, it always comes back to if we can work towards. I don't think necessarily we can solve, and this is something I said to Tracy in our last episode, where you can't just burn it all down. I mean, there's all these memes and TikTok videos about burning down the patriarchy, and I'm like, well, I like men, I don't. I like the compatibleism that we have. So it's not something that we can just do away with immediately. We have to build something up beside it, and that's where I really feel like y'all are doing that work at Central. Is that you're giving people a different perspective on what church can be about.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. I have my burn it down days, like very much Game of Thrones, like Dracarys kind of thing. Just like, let's torch the whole thing, Or Peter Rollins, who's this Irish philosopher that I really like. He's developed what he's called pyrotheology.
Oh, yeah? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Which is basically
I gotta look that up.
Set the whole thing on fire, right? But then when he points back to is like after that, and you're sorting through the rubble and the ashes, these three remain: faith, hope, and love, right? And so I think finding a space to unapologetically go after these things of justice, of equity, because anything less than that, I think, is selling out for our folks in the margins and not pushing hard enough of what they deserve.
Yeah.
But leaving people open to transformation too, and not assuming that. I think often the oppressors, there's a lot of intentionality, but I think there's a lot of not knowing too. And so Christians then are the ones that have the guts, the courage to say, going back to this hearing the cry, if I'm not hearing the cry, if whenever I think of the poor, I can't think of a face and a name, is there a chance I'm participating in these systems, right?
Oh, wow.
And asking that kind of question of ourselves and having the courage to do that. There's an invitation there to, I think, reclaim humanity. So there was a Sunday at Central that... somebody was coming in and using our services, an unsheltered person, and they said to me, Michael, just so grateful for everything y'all do here. This place makes me feel human again, is what they said. Same Sunday, a person who flies planes for American Airlines or something like that, lots of money, does very well, wrote us a check for a lot of money that Sunday and said, Michael, I've been really wrestling with like greed and my privilege and all of this stuff. And so I just want to thank you because this place makes me feel human again. And so you have like same Sunday, people on total opposite sides of the divide saying being able to interact with the other, living in this generous kingdom kind of way. There's something about this reclaiming of humanity that happens that gets lost when we oppress others and when we're oppressed by others, right? It's both a loss on both sides. So Central's trying to be a space that says, come along with us. There's always a seat at the table, but we're unapologetically going to be moving towards these things. And for some people, they step off the train early, and others are, still riding along with us, and some will rejoin us at the next station. But yeah, I think it's that invitational space of trying to make things as they are. And having a little bit of pyromania whenever we need to as well too, right? It's important.
I like that. I don't. Yeah, my husband's an engineer, and so he's like, fire's bad.
Yeah. It definitely can be. It definitely can be.
Yeah. Well, what is, and feel free to pass on this question if you want to, but what does the future hold for you? What is I think, well, tell us where Central is right now, especially in the middle of the pandemic.
Great.
And then we'll go to the future.
Perfect. Yeah. So we suspended worship March of 2020, when I think most people did. And then only came back to in-person worship in, I think it was July or August of last year, 2021.
Same with us.
A good 15, 18 months, whatever that is. During that time, we continued with all of our social services, though, because we realized that this was an especially vulnerable time for the most vulnerable among us. So what that looks like is on a Tuesday, Thursday, folks can come in, they can take a shower. We've got laundry facilities available. We do a hot meal. We've got our bicycle repair clinic. We provide storage lockers. So as you can imagine, if you have all your possessions with you, it's easy to lose important documents. It's also challenging during seasons. So you don't want to be carrying a winter coat with you when it's 1,000 degrees in Galveston in July. But you might need that for next winter. So storage for that. We also have an on-site medical clinic that we partner with UTMB.
Is that new?
Relatively. So we ran a pilot program this summer, and then it's getting kicked into full gear. But like somebody can walk in and get diagnosed and treated from everything from HIV and hepatitis C to foot care for folks with diabetes. They get prescription meds day of at no cost.
Wow.
We have a dentist that's on site. So it's just an amazing program. Again, that care for the whole body, or
Right.
the whole person kind of piece. Like bodies
You provide
matter.
mental health services
We do some
as
mental
well.
health services. We partner with a couple of groups, and hopefully that'll get expanded too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of just been chugging along. And so it created some challenges because, we had folks that started coming to Central for those services during the pandemic who had no idea that we were a church, right? Because there was no services happening.
Right.
And then we had other folks that were logging in on Sundays and watching us online that had no idea they'd be sitting next to, Joe Homeless on on a Sunday morning. And so there was some surprise when we came back to in person about like, look who I'm with. And so, one of our big goals for this year is to make sure we're not accidentally two communities, but one that's living with each other and encouraging each other and loving each other,
Right.
and finding again those ways of mutuality to learn and be with one another. So
Are y'all still streaming services?
we do, we're still streaming online because we have a lot of folks, like I'm sure everyone does, that still aren't quite ready to come back, especially those with littles, and it's a scary time.
Yeah.
And, it's helped with we've got folks that regularly turn in from Ohio and Atlanta.
Right.
And,
It's the beauty of the phygital world.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
We're leaning really hard into the phygital space, but that fits what we do already. So
absolutely.
So as far as all the social services and the programming type, so what are you actually responsible for? I'm just curious.
Like all of that.
Really?
Yeah. So like I've got a job description, and there's that pesky little clause of like other duties as assigned, and that's like 95% of what I do. Yeah. So if you walk in on Tuesday, Thursday, you'll see me helping people get like towels and refilling the shower dispenser. I will cook meals for folks. We've got other groups that come in and do that as well too, but kind of that collaborative effort, overseeing our bicycle stuff, so kind of managing all those programs.
So you're like a operations business manager slash elder
pastor slash fundraiser slash friend, all those kinds of things. So it's challenging. I'm worn out on Tuesday, Thursdays. But it's a gift, and all kinds of exciting things. We're working on a transitional housing project now, so trying to acquire property where folks can transition out of homelessness. Galveston has a lot of services that are temporary, so shelters where you can get away for a month or so. But for our most chronic folks, there's not a lot of things available. So we're hoping to move into that game here pretty soon. And maybe some permanent supportive housing options too. I just think housing is a human right. Being a human means you should be able to be inside.
Right.
And for the city, what we see is if people have a roof over their head, your bouts with mental illness, your interactions with law enforcement, your emergency medicine, like a lot of our folks are using the ER as primary care right now because they don't have insurance. So our clinic is trying to address that. But substance abuse often decreases and moves to later in the day. So just by getting somebody a house with no additional social services, your life improves dramatically.
Right.
And so then we're going to hopefully couple social services with that'll give people a chance to flourish and live into the life that God's called us all to live.
Yeah. So have you adopted or looked into other models like what they've done at St. John's and Rudy's doing?
I call and text Rudy pretty regularly. I'm like, we don't know what the hell we're doing, so let's help me figure this out, Rudy.
Right,
so.
that TikTok, are we supposed to know what we're doing here?
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, no, just figure it out as you go.
And that's a lot of it, is just kind of embracing the messiness of it. Church should be messy, and so it's very messy at Central. So we're trying to learn from Rudy and from others that are doing that work. And also I'm working with some researchers at UTMB that are trying to think through new ways of doing things. I'm actually heading to Kenya in a couple weeks, and I'll be there for 3 weeks. And again, we were joking about mission trips, like not to save the Kenyans kind of thing, but
they're doing just fine
to actually go learn.
Is it? Were you going to Maua?
Yes, we'll be staying in that area. So not working with the hospital, but we'll be staying at the hospital.
We were supposed to go in 2020. We haven't gone yet.
So anyway, excited about that. But they figured out this way of building communal resiliency. So again, the individual problem we've been talking about, hyper individual, I'm my own person, pull myself up by my bootstraps kind of thing. That's one level of resiliency, and it's what we tend to hyper focus on in the U.S. But if we can build whole communities that are flourishing and that can depend on each other, our most vulnerable have a better chance of not getting caught up in these systems of oppression. And so we're going to go see it. I'm going to go learn from what they're doing there and hopefully find a way to translate that here to the United States, which is exciting. Yeah. There's a guy named Michael Goodman who I work with at UTMB who's an epidemiologist and like the smartest dude that I know. Like I need a dictionary every time he's talking. But he's got such a heart for this kind of work and doing things differently in a way that allows people to imagine their own futures instead of me as like a middle-class white guy saying like you must want a big house and 2 cars and 3.5 kids or whatever it is. No. What do you want your future to be like? What is God leading you into, and how do we leverage that and help you see yourself as a leader and being able to self-determine that good future on your own?
Yeah, that's incredible.
It's exciting.
So do you think this is your life's work?
That's a great question. I've got the best job in the world. And so I think at the time it was probably the worst appointment in the conference, right? Going to this church that had 4 people in a building that was falling apart.
Right.
The average age was 150. And so, love those people, but man. And it's been the most surprising, wonderful, joyful. I mean, I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful we get to be in Galveston for a really long time.
Right.
My other dream is to be a trophy husband. So, Mariah's kind of working on that, my wife. And so that could be the only thing that messes with this a little bit. So I'd make a good trophy husband.
Yeah. And you can just do all this for free.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So
that's my husband's dream as well.
Yeah.
He's like, when is this writing thing going to take off? And
exactly.
I'm writing about God. I don't know.
We'll start a support group or something.
Right. I mean, Rick Warren did pretty well, and Beth Morden has done okay, but just go ahead and keep working on it. Please.
Yes. So, no, I hope we're here for a long time. I feel like we're just on the cusp of some really huge, giant things.
Yeah.
And Galveston is the perfect city. Like I said, it's this microcosm of the world.
Yeah.
And so it's got the resources to really be able to become a model city for other places on how we might do better.
Right. Well, and too, there's something even in the church, or I don't know if the culture got it from us or we got it from the culture, but the idea that you have to keep moving, you have to keep ascending, you have to keep your ambition alive, stoke those fires. There's something to be said. I mean, Eugene Peterson is a great example of that. His whole life, he pastored basically the same church.
That's right.
So I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, as long as they'll put up with me, I'll stay.
Right.
So that's the big question. It's like, yes.
Yeah.
As long as they'll have me, I would love to stay. But I've kind of given up on that up and to the right mentality of like it's always got to be bigger and better. I think again thinking about the church in the future, I think the church is getting smaller and smaller. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right.
And so having this little group of people that are committed to each other, that are fostering these beautiful relationships, these improbable friendships. Really learning to dig in and dig deep with each other, do life together. It's something I want to give my life to. Well,
that really is the first century church in today's day and age. That's what it is. So. Yeah, that's what they did the best, and that's what we can hope to do.
Yeah.
So
I think that's right.
Okay, so if somebody wants to learn more, or whether that's about Central or about you, or how to get involved in rectifying the unhoused epidemic, who do you follow? Who do you track? Who do you read?
Yeah.
Tell the people.
Great. You mentioned Greg Boyle. That's like my favorite. He's doing incredible things, especially around like issues of employment. His work is obviously more focused on gang reentry, but that overlaps a lot with this population, as you can imagine. So he's brilliant. Again, I think what Rudy Rasmus is doing with St. John's and Bread of Life downtown are beautiful. The Episcopals do a pretty good job of this too. So the Beacon, which is a place downtown, they have kind of a day center, but they all have all these supportive services as well. So it's not just food, it's also legal services, it's employment opportunity. And if you want to follow the work at Central, our website is galvestoncentralchurch.com. We're on Facebook as well too. So those are good places to kind of pick up on that. But more research about the housing first model. That's a theory that came out of, I think, NYU. That basically just says like it's a crazy solution, but like how do we fix homelessness? We like give people homes. Like right, amazing. So
I've sold that to several people because I have a real good friend who works in Illinois. She works in social services, but finding people homes is the biggest one, and that meets the inherent need for security.
That's it. You think about Maslow and the hierarchy, like that first base level, before I can think about my addiction, or before I can address my trauma, or before I can deal with these family relationships, like I need a place that I can call safe and home, you know?
Right.
So, in some ways, Central's been able to create that. We've got folks that say this is my home away from homelessness, but it's not a permanent place for people to be.
Right.
I need to go home at the end of the day and close my door and sit down on my couch and just be, you know?
Sanctuary.
That's exactly right. And so getting people that chance to get out of a survival mindset and to be able to think about thriving is vital. So, so those are some good resources to check out. And Houston has done a phenomenal job. I mean, Houston has essentially lowered it's cut its homeless rate in half, I think. And I think veteran homelessness is basically not a thing in Houston anymore, which is amazing. But thanks to a concerted housing first effort. So,
well, I pray God blesses you with a Beyonce.
Yeah, right? That's what I need.
That's what you need.
That's exactly what I need. My own Beyonce. She's got a place in Galveston. I keep trying to
stalk her.
Yeah, exactly.
Show up.
Hey, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so,
maybe Jay-Z can help us.
That would be amazing.
You can keep St. John's.
Or Tillman Fertitta. I mean, he's a Galveston guy, but
that's true.
His big fancy yacht is on the island right now.
Okay.
So maybe he'll let some homeless people live with him on his yacht. That would be nice. One can hope. That would probably be a temporary solution. I think so.
Yeah, but dare to dream.
I know. You got to dream big. So, but I knew if there are any Galveston celebrities listening to this, give me a call. So I will take your money.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with us. It was a wonderful conversation.
Thanks, Amy. This is a joy.
All right. Applying Jesus is hosted and produced by Amy Vogel, Director of Spiritual Growth for Upper Room Heights. We record at Chapelwood United Methodist Church Digital Studio in Houston, Texas. We hope something you heard today has deepened your faith, opened your eyes, and led you to not only knowing God in a more expansive way, but shift how you connect, especially with those who are easy to overlook. To find out more about Amy and our church community, go to www.urheights.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Remember, we love you, and there's nothing you can do about it.